Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order of the regular Planning Commission meeting of Tuesday, February 12th, 2019. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, for those in the audience and on the board, if we can silence your cell phones. And can we have roll call, please?
Mr. Audia? Ms. Fenton? Ms. Hodges?
Here.
Mr. Jacobson?
Here.
Mr. Kucera?
Here.
Mr. McHale?
Here.
Ms. Scripture? Mr. Shepard?
Here.
Mr. Watson?
Here.
All right, do I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes from the Planning Commission meeting of January 8th, 2019?
I will make a motion to approve the regular meeting minutes from January 8, 2019.
Support?
We have support. Roll call, please.
Ms. Hodges?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Kucera?
Yes.
Mr. McHale?
Yes.
Mr. Shepard?
Yes.
Mr. Watson?
Yes.
Okay, next on the agenda is to approve the 2018 annual report.
I'll make a motion that we approve the 2018 annual report as posted.
Support?
We have support. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Kucera?
Yes.
Mr. McHale?
Yes.
Mr. Shepard?
Yes.
Mr. Watson?
Yes.
Ms. Hodges?
Yes.
All right, next, we have the consideration for site plan approval for 1421 North Main. Also, we can call this the Wendy's Restaurant. I do not see the applicant here. Is that true? Okay. Do we proceed, or? I know, yeah. Any feelings as far as proceeding without the applicant, or?
I just have a question. I just couldn't, it would be helpful. Maybe the Giffords-Webster team took a look at this. No one came before us before, so we looked at their site plan review. We offered some comments. It looks like essentially the same thing. Did they make any additional updates? I just couldn't really.
The plans that we got were dated after the last meeting, so presumably they did do some updates to it. I think they put in trees in the area there, the two
Okay,
along the
there's two
street
trees.
and the one in the back. They didn't indicate what they were, and they didn't include a landscape plan, which is the one thing that we thought you should have. So I don't know that it's necessarily productive to have this item continue and have you take action. You could table it and
Table it or postpone? What's the?
You don't really want to table.
postpone.
Yeah. Yeah, because I'd rather have some direct questions of the
I think
applicant.
that would be helpful.
I certainly don't want to delay them. At the same time, I think it behooves them to be here
Yeah.
to address any concerns that we have or any questions that they may have that they haven't thought about during our discussion.
One thing I will say is that obviously we've done a letter. We can discuss the letter with them and make sure that they can see if they can update their plans prior to coming back,
Right.
so that
Okay.
we're not dealing with the same issues every time.
No, I agree. But at the same time, is there anything that's specific that we may want to address now that could be communicated back to them before we postpone?
I can run through our PowerPoint presentation very quickly.
Yeah, why don't we, any opposition? No, okay, why don't we do that?
And then you could take action if
Okay.
you'd like to postpone it.
I mean, quite honestly, I would like to postpone it, but I would like to, see in 3D, so to speak.
And most of this you've already seen, because you did this a couple months ago.
Yep.
In fact, I'm going to move this up here, and that way I'm not speaking away from the microphone. So you know where the site is, you know what it looks like. We have some pictures. There was a gentleman in the back. He was actually emptying the trash when I went through there. I was the only person in the parking lot, and I felt a little creepy taking pictures of him emptying the garbage, so I waited a little bit. But you'll see that
And now it's on the record.
there's a pile of snow in the back corner there where that wall was proposed to be removed, there on the northwest corner on the north property line. It's just views from the front where we agree that trees would be appropriate to be added there. And you'll see these on the plans. The bubbled areas are the plans that are the changed areas from the last plans, as we understand it. And those two there on North Main, and then the one again in the back, northwest corner. We noted that your conversations, well, and I was here for your conversations, that you talked extensively about landscaping. And the minutes reflected that you had also asked for landscaping around the base of the sign. I didn't see any on their plans, and so that was one of the things we just put in the elevations here. I thought that was nice. I was able to find an image that is not too dissimilar from what they're proposing here. I thought that would be kind of helpful to see the change there. So as far as we understand, the outstanding issues to be the landscape plan, and we think that it would be helpful for them to identify the tree species. We looked over the city's tree list, the approved tree list, and we agreed with most of those. There were a couple that we thought were highlighted, the ginkgo, the linden, the plain tree, to be appropriate with all of the road salts and that. And then again, the landscape materials are on the sign base. We also noted that we couldn't tell whether the location of the sign is proper, the monument sign, because there weren't any property lines on the plans. So those were the things that we highlighted. And our recommendation was actually to just recommend approval of that based on revised site plans indicating compliance with those items. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about that. Or
Sure. I mean, just a quick comment. I mean, I feel, I'm glad to see that they did some work, but it feels like maybe a bit of a half step from the conversation we
did.
had last time
Right.
around literally the trees, the landscape plan. I think we had a substantial conversation about the sign as well. You know, my personal opinion is to postpone the conversation to allow more time for that process, recognizing it might slow them down, but hopefully it might clarify things for us for the next conversation.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah, I agree with that. The other thing, too, as far as getting a better sense as far as the height of the monument sign, I think they were talking 8 foot.
I believe it was 8.
And in comparison to that is the Taco Bell sign. How does that, compare? And do they have, I went online and took a look at other new Wendy's footprints that have gone up. And there's different variations of the Wendy's sign. There's the one with the actual woman's image on top of the Wendy's, or they're just flat. So I guess, again, as far as what does that do, what does it do for sight lines,
Well, and that was the other issue for us, was to make sure that the sign was out of the corner clearance area to preserve those views for the street.
So, yeah, I mean, that, and obviously as far as the ginkgos that are next door to Taco Bell, what does that do as far as continuing a same or similar species? Is that something, and this will be something I'm going to bring up later on at some point, either this meeting or later, as far as a landscape comprehensive approach, right? So, like how many species, depending on the number of trees, right, in order to, again, provide a diversity.
Right.
All right, so, and I'd want to consider that a little bit more before we decide. And maybe they say that they have a specific type and variety in mind. And then the other thing I wanted to have addressed is, I've been noticing a number of outdoor lighting. I don't necessarily say it's wattage, but it's the lumens that are coming off and are in the roadway, not necessarily spilling over, but the intensity of some of these lights are getting to the point where they are becoming a distraction, in my opinion. Is that an issue here as far as?
I think so. They weren't adding any lights except for around the exterior facade. They were proposing some downlighting.
Okay.
And that's up in the top of the parapet, that dark band at the top. There's lighting in that shines down on the building.
Okay.
It would be nice if they would replace their roof lights, and so we can discuss that with them as well.
That'd be perfect, put them on the plan, absolutely. And then obviously, as far as striping for pedestrian walk in and out,
Right.
that's always been an issue, in my opinion, as far as on the south side. And as far as height, that blade, I guess is what they're calling it, right? As far as, what is the height on, what was that height? I don't recall seeing that.
Overall height is 27?
What does our ordinance say? Is it limited to 25?
No, it's not that tall. It's 17
Okay.
to the blade. top of
Okay,
the blade.
all right, okay. So it's under.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. I guess that's all that I,
Did you have,
I have noticed the problem with site lighting also. We've had numerous locations convert their original incandescent lights to the LED, which throw out a lot more brightness, and they've lit up a couple of our houses on adjoining properties,
Yep.
and we've had issues with them pointing them down. Instead of the box lights, they're actually flat lights now, and then the LEDs can pretty much be seen even if you're a couple of houses away. And
oh,
they're much
absolutely.
brighter.
I mean, I've noticed it coming down Main Street on a couple locations, one in particular, that I understand as far as, it's good that they did replace them, but, proper shielding in that instance, what,
yeah, it's very important.
how are they proposing and downlighting? I'd like to see that too. So, okay. All right, anything else?
I guess they're just on hold until they decide to come back in front of us.
Yep, so, do I have a motion to postpone, if that's
I
what
think
we,
that, yeah.
okay,
I'll make a motion, we postpone.
I support.
okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Casera?
Yes.
Mr. McHale?
Yes.
Mr. Shepherd?
Yes.
Mr. Watson?
Yes.
Mr. Hodges?
Yes,
I'm sorry, Ms. Hodges?
it's okay, yes.
And Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
You are outnumbered. All right. Okay, so item number 7 is consideration for site plan approval for 288 West 14 Mile Road. This will be an existing house renovation to a gallery or shop.
And Joe and I are going to tag team, so I did the
Okay.
first one, he's going to do this one for you.
Perfect.
Okay, so we actually do have this applicant here. So we're looking at, it's an existing house. It's on 0.19 acres. It's about an 8,300 square foot lot. And they are requesting to convert that house into a gallery or retail use. Site zone B1 local business, so it's got the zoning for it. Actually, if you look back, you can see what's around it too. So we've got some residential behind and then other business around it. And then the senior towers across the street. This is a better view. One thing that this view shows is the wall along the back of all the other commercial properties. That'll figure into our conversation a little later. And this is when you're on 14 Mile. It's the house with the green wood. They're proposing to paint that wood black. And then this is from, you're looking west from another site, kind of across a yard toward the rear of this property. And then that brings us to the site plan. So you can see there's a garage. I wish I had a pointer. Yeah, there's a garage in the rear yard. You can see kind of a rectangle behind the house right there.
Okay.
That's going to be taken down, and then the rear yard is essentially going to become the parking lot. There are a lot of things about the configuration of the site that necessitate the parking lot to be there because there's really no other place for it. It's It's got a fairly shallow front yard, and then there's not much space on either side of the house either. So the parking is.
If I don't mind me interrupting, two slides back to the aerial, there's a house, there's a lot two lots east that's developed with the 4 apartments, and the configuration is very similar in that there's a narrow driveway that leads back to a little parking area. So I just want to,
Apartments, you
it's
said,
similar.
is that right?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah, there were 4. I actually took some pictures of it because I thought it was a really interesting way to tuck in some additional residential in that area.
So in addition to removing the garage, they're putting in that parking lot. They've got 7 spaces there. They are adding an ADA compliant ramp in the rear, and they're putting a new door on at the terminus of that ramp. And then they are adding some landscaping. You can see it along the rear property line there, and then there's some down along the east property line. North is to your right. So. And then, as I said, they're painting the trim black. It's green now. They're really not proposing much lighting. There's one wall-mounted light and a parking lot light. They've got the ramp, and then the existing brick facade is going to remain otherwise. They're showing a few things on here. If you look at the photo at the upper left of this group of photos, there's a little dotted area there where the sign is proposed to go. There's a wall sign. They are proposing a sign in the back, and we'll get to that in a little bit. So we had a few thoughts here. One is that you have that really narrow driveway, and when you have multiple parking spaces and a lot behind a building and a really narrow driveway like that, obviously there's no room to widen it. So we have to work with what we've got. One of the things that they're proposing to do is they're proposing to widen the mouth of the driveway so that 2 cars can be in the mouth of the driveway up to where the house is, so that if someone's coming out when someone's coming in, you don't have a problem where someone's out on the road waiting for someone to come out. So we think that's pretty essential. One of the things that we'd like to see is some signage added just to guide circulation. We can discuss what that might say, watch for other vehicles or something like that, or there's not room for 2 cars here, but something along those lines, just to give people a heads up that they need to be cautious. There is a 6-foot obscuring wall required along the north property line adjacent to any R district. What they're showing right now is a chain link fence and some landscaping. And as I pointed out in the earlier image, the other commercial properties do have that wall there. The house to the east obviously doesn't, because it's still a house, but this property never had that because it was residential up until now. And then the rear entrance sign, they have a sign that says Tribal Fair above the rear door. And what we found going through your sign ordinance is that a facade that's facing an R district is actually not allowed to have a wall sign that identifies the business on it under your sign ordinance. So that sign isn't actually permitted. As for some discussion issues, when we were looking at the parking, we were trying to figure out, because they use a certain standard, and we'll let them address why they use that standard. And we thought that just looking at the use, that it seemed more like a gallery or artisan studio. So we applied that parking standard. And there are some. Do you have the letter that I can reference? Yes. So, looking at off-street parking, they calculated parking on the basis of furniture, appliance, hardware, and household equipment sales and repair shops. And that's 1 space per 600 square feet of usable floor area. That yields a parking requirement of 5 spaces. They've got 7, so they're obviously in excess of that. We did notice that artisan studios and sales was an identified use with a parking requirement, though, and that seems very similar to what this business does. So when we applied that, that's 4 spaces per 1,000 square feet of gross floor area. When you apply that to the whole building, including the basement, that gives you 11 spaces. If you subtract the basement, which is marked storage on the plan, that yields a requirement of 7 spaces. So I guess basically the question is, can we discount the basement from the square footage? And that kind of makes it a moot point which standard we go with. If we do include the basement, then we're in a situation where we've got to determine what the appropriate standard to calculate the parking was, because either you need a variance or you have enough parking. It's kind of.
So did you have a direct conversation with them about the basement?
But we have not had that conversation with them about the basement, no.
Okay.
We'll address it here with them.
Let me ask, Jim, do we have any businesses that have basements as part of their plan of operation?
Part of their plan of operation, I think you're using the wrong terminology.
Okay. I'm trying to think of what
The church that's right across the street over here, they have a basement that they use as part of their church. Like, so that has to be included in their requirement for parking, I'm assuming, correct?
Yeah, they do have banquets and stuff down there. There's
Right.
a kitchen area in there. Wonderground Magic has mostly storage, but they do have magic classes in the basement below their space.
Oh, go please. Okay.
So this one's listed as storage.
Right, and the reason we wanted to discuss the basement is that it does talk about gross floor area in that standard that we were looking at, the artisan studios.
Okay.
And that would include anything basically within the walls. Whereas usable floor area is a standard that responds basically to where customers are going to be.
Okay.
Realize we're putting a commercial use into an existing residential house.
Oh, yeah.
So there's obstacles to changing the use of an existing building. So. I did get a email from Harry Drinkwine with his concerns about the opening of the narrow driveway, making sure there's enough maneuverability that if a car coming into the approach off of 14 Mile and a car coming on the driveway, that they have room to get around each other. They would like more dimensions added to the front porch.
As far as the corner of the house, how close is that to the drive?
I believe there's a 25-foot, or maybe it's only a 20-foot setback. The architect can talk about it a little bit more. It's tight up there, but like I said, we're adapting a residential house for a commercial business.
Sure. Okay.
So with the proper signage, I don't anticipate a problem. He just wanted some more dimensions, so to ease our minds that a 20-foot wide car can get in there, or a 20-foot long car can get in there in one pass by.
Okay. Because I know that this came up years ago as far as Evolve, but that had more to do with residents walking up Charlevoix and potential car coming out, right? That we asked that they have a mirror there. I know that mirror has twisted over time, not necessarily serving the purpose that it was intended. I think as far as what the risk has been lessened due to the amount of traffic that they actually have, but they were willing to put that in. Is that something that could help mitigate that along with the sign? Because I know we can't ask them to put some, at least in my opinion, put something in such as a downtown apartment complex that has warning bells and so forth that says a car coming out, right? So, but.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would probably be excessive, but yeah, I mean, I guess we could look at, I don't know if a mirror, because you're going to see the vehicle. When you're pulling into the driveway, you'll see someone coming. It's more a matter of just, particularly people coming out actually kind of need to be aware that cars coming in are going to be moving faster, you know? So.
And that was the,
You can see 2 lots over.
Let's make sure we're on the microphone.
Yep.
Yeah.
The apartment building has a further setback than this, but you can see the width of the approach is approximately the same size, so if they extend this a little bit wider, then you get the wider approach just like that,
And that's essentially what they're proposing.
so.
Well, coming off of 14, looks like the apartment complex is a little bit wider, isn't it? Or
Yeah, it was probably designed for a wider,
Okay.
15-foot wide instead of a standard 10-foot wide
Sure.
residential driveway.
Okay. Okay. All right. So, but as far as coming around the corner of the house, they're not going to run into any concern about.
The driveway really goes straight back, so there's not gonna, you're gonna be able to see that the vehicle
Okay.
is there, so it's not like coming around a corner blind.
Okay. For a need for a bollard or anything like that. right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I don't
Okay.
think that's a problem.
Okay.
Let me just see if I get this clear. So when they're turning off a 14-mile road and they're turning in there, you're gonna have enough concrete there where they're turning in and another car's right there? Or are you saying that when they're pulling in and there's concrete here, but it goes back down to a single, so there's a potential where there is gonna be where two cars are coming in and they could be stuck right there?
So, okay, Jim.
So they're talking about taking this existing approach, widening it, and put a wider concrete area in front. So if somebody's coming out the driveway, you have enough width. Actually, it is 20 feet wide to maneuver.
So how much are you talking about between the house and the road they're gonna put a slab of concrete? But you're still gonna have a problem along that single part between the house, right there. I mean, they could still end up having an issue there. Or I mean, or even just having two cars at the end. I mean, I see problems.
So if somebody's coming out this driveway and they see somebody coming in this approach, one person can maneuver.
Well, let's just say they're not really paying attention because they're watching their cell phone. I don't know. I just don't see people paying attention. It just seems a little tight, and then in the front, there's not a lot of room. It's not set back as far as the apartment complex, one.
Although this driveway
It
is
just sounds like
wider.
it's going to be very, very tight.
I would feel completely different about that. I would think that as a driver, I'm coming into something that I instinctively see is a narrow in confined space, so I'm going to probably be paying more attention than I were if I was on the open road and there's a lot of room and I might glance at my phone. But I would assume that people will take the care that they realize will be needed in approaching and coming out of this narrower space.
I just want to assume.
So I can.
Just-
I'm okay with assuming.
I see a lot of drivers that don't pay attention, or they're looking to see where they turn. They might look down.
I don't want to discount the safety concerns that exist with this. What I'm less clear on is what the actual nature of the business is and how frequently, and we can get to that. I know that's just the piece where I come out on the question of just wondering what the purpose, the use is, the activity on the site.
Sure. Yeah, and I'd like them to speak to what they do and why they chose that parking category that they did and other things like that.
Okay. All right. So as far as, do you have other recommendations for this site?
If we can resolve the issues that are pointed out in our letter, we have no problem recommending approval.
Okay.
It's just we got to work through those issues.
Well, maybe we could take a pause and hear from the applicant, because I'm also a little lost then on the basement question as well, and just to hear a little bit more about what's going to go on in the facility.
Sure.
All right. State your name and your business.
Rajiv Akolkar, and the business is Tribal Fair. So my wife, who's not here, is really the soul of the business. She's on a sourcing trip outside of the country. But to answer two questions, so maybe let me start with the background of the business. The business is a retail store. It is based on getting artisan-made products from different parts of the world and Detroit as well. So my wife is working with different artisans in Mexico, Guatemala, India, China, and Detroit as well. wherever we have actually lived. So we've lived in these places in our lifetime so far, and we've made connections with people. And my wife is very passionate about handcrafted, about handmade, this kind of stuff, and so that's what she wants to pursue. So the business is about that. It's about highlighting handcrafted treasures from around the world, including the United States. So that's the background of the business. So in the past, my wife has had very good success in the Detroit metro area with pop-ups, and she also had a studio that she rented in downtown Detroit in Techtown, in the building for almost a year. So based on all this, we feel that it would be a good business that would succeed. To answer your question around the traffic, the flow of people. So my wife has grown the business mainly on word of mouth and appointments and this kind of stuff. So the clients that come there, because this is handcrafted and handmade, the products that are going to be in there are not going to be for everyone, in the sense that, our average transaction sale for the business was $60. So just to give you a perspective of what kind of clientele would be coming in there. So we expect that most of the business and the clients that she would get would be from people who have shopped with her before. And we don't expect that, hence, that there would be a lot of, let me say, street people or traffic coming in. So that's, let me say, to answer your question. The second thing about the basement, that is going to be never planned to be a customer area. It's planned for office space, planned for employees. It's going to have a small, like, refrigerator, that kind of stuff for office. It's going to be an office.
Got it. Thank you for walking me through that. I really appreciate that. And I'm very familiar with Techtown, so it's interesting to hear that that's where the business started from, and recognizing that parking around Techtown is a little bit challenging as well. And so at least there's some experience with challenging parking and getting in and out of places. Just really quickly, just so I understand it fully, is it mainly in person? Do you anticipate in-person retail sales or online component? And maybe what's the balance of that? Not knowing the business.
Yeah. So we do have an online store now. But for something like this, my wife feels very passionately about talking to people about the product. It's not just the product; it's about the story behind that product. To who made it, why they made it, what is that craft about. And so typically when a customer comes in, my wife spends one-on-one time with a customer for a significant amount of time. It's not where you would walk into a store and just pick up something and leave in 5 minutes. So I mean, I think we expect that the customers will spend, there will not be too many customers, but we expect that the customers will spend significant amount of time in the shop.
What type of hours will she be keeping with her business?
So we're thinking it would be like 11 o'clock, 10:30, 11 in the morning until 7 or 8 in the night. We have to see what other businesses are doing in that area, but that's what we were thinking. We also want, the plan right now is not to be open 7 days a week. The plan is to be open maybe 5 or 6 days as a retail store, and then save 1 or 2 days for like special events, where it would be a smaller group, an intimate event, someone's celebrating someone's birthday or something like this, or talking about a craft, or inviting someone from Detroit who makes something into the store to talk about it, and this kind of stuff. So that's a smaller, more intimate event. We want to have those as well, to be able to highlight artisans from the area.
Do you have a final decision as far as the style of the ramp?
I think your wife was saying she leans towards the metal round because
Yeah.
primarily she likes a black.
We need a microphone. Thank you, David.
Hey, Art Kalajian, the architect on this, and a lot of time I spent with the wife, so unfortunately, since she's not here, I'll have to fill in. I gave her two concepts, basically. We looked at three. One was a lift, then the wood, and then the metal. Actually, she liked the metal, a black wrought iron type of look, it'd be decorative. What's interesting about the ramp is it was actually less cost. It was the most cost effective of all the solutions. So what we would do is create a porch that's basically tied to the building, and then the ramp would be. It doesn't really actually need footings because of the way it's fabricated. We'll anchor it into the ground, but it'll be self-sustaining. It could be dismantled actually theoretically, but the stairs and the porch itself will be anchored with footings. So she likes to go with the black and introduce the black throughout the whole structure, so it all kind of ties in. And then the awning shingles will probably be more or less a dark-colored black ultimately, because we're doing a re-roofing of the rear as well, and then it projects out a little bit to protect the porch itself. About the one thing that wasn't talked about, I'd like to bring up, Orgy, could you give me the photographs there? There is a, we're trying to mimic, I'll pass this out in a minute, but the next door neighbor has this long row of arborvitae that's thick like a wall, and we like the concept of it. When you look at these photographs, there's a wall that's bulging out that we own on this property, and it's bulging out due to the arborvitae. So one thing we'd like to do is take it down. Since there's no effective use, it's actually an eyesore. So what we want to do is basically follow the arborvitae.
This on the west side?
This is on the west side.
Okay. All right.
So I'd like to just, you can pat and see what we're trying to do here.
Okay.
And
Oh, yeah.
essentially what we want to do is mimic that, where you have a screen wall that's natural.
See, this is what happens when you don't consider maturity for a
Right.
species when you plant it. But
And I think it's so thick that if we do remove it, it'd be better for everyone, actually. And then we would like to do that in lieu of, also with the chain link fence. There's deciduous trees along the rear, and really the side of the east side is a garage that's blocking the other house. But if we go with the arborvitaes there, it'll pretty much almost screen the whole parking area. And then if you notice the parking lot light, it faces away from the residence, so we're thinking, we're being sensitive so that as long as there's a residence there, we're not creating a light issue there as well.
Okay.
So effectively, we want to use the landscaping as a tool.
where was the light again?
Right there.
Right there? Okay. And then as far as you have a green belt along the north line of the property?
There's yes, and we're taking out the deciduous trees that are there, except for the one tall tree, but there's deciduous shrubs about the height of the fence, so it'll be a screen throughout the year.
Are there power lines or any other utility lines along that fence line?
They're up high. There's an electrical meter. It's on the side of the house where the drive is, so it's away from that area, and it's on the east side.
Okay.
Right around there.
So that light exists already, or?
No, we're
Okay.
proposing that. It's a LED elliptical. We had a choice of two types. We could go with two smaller lights that were like 12 feet high, or one that was more like 18 to do that. I did a little research, and it was more cost effective to go with a little bit higher, and then just have one pole and not light up the area too brightly.
Sure.
We do have one wall-mounted light for the drive, and where the side drive is, we'll mount, and it's a cut-off luminaire that will shine directly down, so that strip of area that's concerned will be lit up at night. And the front is pretty much has a light pole near it already, so we didn't really add any additional lights in the frontage.
Okay.
The one thing that wasn't mentioned was the previous engineer, I think his name was Mike Smith, recommended that extra width be dropped to 5 feet. I like to keep it at 6 feet plus the 11 feet, so two cars could it'll be a little tight, but the reason why he recommended the 5 feet was to stay 3 feet away from the light pole that's there. And I agree that, you know, we could maintain 3 feet and lose a couple feet, but I don't want to lose the full 10 feet that I have there. So I like to make, when we're having a survey done of the property by a professional survey, we'll get it exactly right. But my drawing's fairly accurate, but we'll get it down to where there's the 3-foot buffer from the existing light pole.
Is there a
And
requirement as far as how far you need to be away from?
the light pole,
Yeah.
it was just something he mentioned, 3 feet. I don't know if it's a set requirement, but a curb there would help protect it as well. My thinking is 2.5 feet could be enough, because that's typically what a curb protects a building, is if you have overhang at 2.5 feet. So we would probably squeeze that drive if that's still something the board wishes to slightly reduce that width, but I would say 17 to 18 feet there would be adequate for 2 cars. It's like 2 car spaces are 9 feet each, 18 feet. If I go from 20 to 18, I think I'll get the clearance for the light pole. And then we could cut a little bit of that triangular area in front of the, near the porch, to give you a full 21 feet, where a full car could go in there 21 feet. Right now, it's a little bit shy of that, because there's a decorative planter that's there now, but that could be cut back a little bit in the front. It's a little triangular planter.
Right in the
Right there.
southeast corner.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that could be flattened out. So I think the main this is actually a shorter run. It's about 45 feet of length of run that's in danger, but we're going from a 7-foot drive that's there now to 11 feet, and we're cutting the slope down, so it's a lot more maneuverable. It's right now a steep slope, so I think what we're proposing will make it a lot more maneuverable and safer as well. So I think with the lit up drive there and an extra width for maneuvering, where a car could back off if they get trapped, they could maneuver backwards, not on the street, was my main intent for this. And I think we have enough room there, because you have 20 feet to the sidewalk plus another 20 feet plus to the street, so you have 40 feet of maneuverability near the front in reality. Other than that, I think the back area is going to be a private area where she might have lawn events, and so that's one reason why we like to keep the lawn there, and I maintain enough width there for a sidewalk to go into the back if we do something there as well. So most of the landscaping will be along the buffering of the parking lot. There's already 2 existing trees that are in the front, which covers, in the summertime, it covers the whole area pretty much.
Can I ask you a question in regards to the driveway itself? Is that being replaced? Is that being redone?
We would replace the whole driveway itself, and then when it gets to the parking lot, with bidding, we may do that asphalt, we may do the whole thing in concrete. We haven't decided that, but the whole driveway itself and the frontage would be in concrete.
Okay, cool.
Is the planning area, is that going to be curbed, or?
Yeah, the engineer did request curbing, so we're going to follow his it'll be an integral curb tied in.
And snow removal, where will that be placed?
There's not a lot of area for that, but hopefully the arborvitae will be able to take some of that. And there's not a lot for that. We could eliminate one of the car spaces to give more space if we had to, but I'd rather keep the 7 cars, especially since that might be a issue of the number of cars. But the owner thought 6 cars was enough, but we could lose one, because I think we do meet the ordinance space. One thing that's interesting with this house is part of this gross square footage is areas where the walls are only 5 feet high. Theoretically, people are not going to be able to use that, but what she felt is she could put furniture in those low ceilings in the upper level. Really, the square foot by code, 6'8", if you use that, is only about half what I show, but I counted every square inch. So really, this house doesn't have a lot of square feet, but we used everything in it in the calculations for the first and second floor. A lot of it is storage underneath a sloping roof, but I think she could effectively use it the way, and where she's planning on using similar objects down there to try to circumvent the code issues of handicap accessibility to the upper level. Plus, there is I think the newer code allows a small area of this size to be exempt from it. So I think we're okay. The basement would be a real problem to make that accessible to public because it doesn't meet the code requirements for height. It's
How tall?
It's less than 6'8" underneath the beams, but you do get close
It's taller
to
than my basement.
That's our size.
6'6". You know, there's a couple, but it's not so low that you can't use it for storage or for private use.
There was a door in the back.
Yes, that's at halfway down. The actual level of the house is 42 inches above grade. So you're going down a half a set of stairs to the basement from the back. And that's at the upper, what do you call it, west side of the corner of the house. There's a door there.
Yeah.
You can see that in the blow-up plan.
But that's the entrance, that's the entrance to the basement. You go down
Right.
4 steps, and then you're into the basement.
Yeah, I think
essentially.
about 5 or 6 steps, if I remember right.
And that basement is, again, less than 7 feet tall.
Yes, yes.
So as far as that being, the main exits for emergency would be out the front and down the ramp, not, I mean, that
Right.
would be,
Right. And the main entrance really to this is, other than, it looks like the front entrances will be the rear, because that's where everyone parks. So that's why we decided to put a canopy there and showcase that as an entranceway.
so you leave that door for the basement. Would that be used for employees for in and out, or would they use regular entrance?
We were thinking of using that only to move product.
Microphone, please, sorry.
We wanted to leave that the way it is, only to be able to move product in and out, because our basement is going to be really the storage
Okay.
area.
But that's not going to be the main entrance for employees or?
No. Because we have provided those staircase right there next to the ramp, so we would
Okay.
So,
expect everyone to use the, yeah.
Okay.
I have just maybe a comment, a couple last questions for at least myself,
Yeah.
as far as it goes. One, I really appreciate. I actually really enjoy this building. Looking at this building from the outside, I thought it was a really charming building. So I think you have a really creative reuse and clearly a lot of challenges to kind of have it be what you want it to be. I pulled up separately the website for the company, and everything looks great on the website. So it's really exciting to see some of that come into Clawson. So I just personally, as a resident, appreciate that. It sounds like we have flex, and in terms of the 3 components I think the team raised, the flexibility around, from your side, flexibility to work around the parking issues, the layouts. To me, my personal perspective, it sounds like the basement's clearly storage as opposed to use. So for me, that's, you're at the 7, is that the number for the, in that particular coding? Sounds great to me. I think the only item we haven't really fully discussed, and I don't mean to jump a conversation if we're still on these other elements, but definitely want to spend time on the comments around the sign that were raised. So the signage on the back versus signage on the front, to hear a little bit more about how you're thinking about some of that.
I thought there was a section in the code that allowed 10 square feet for the rear based on not having a ground sign, and there's a section in the code, I think, that did talk about additional square footage allowed. So they always had, I think, a 10-foot square foot allowance for rear signage, especially if that's the entranceway, unless that has changed.
You're referring to a different district in the city.
Well, regardless,
Although,
I
I
think
do
maybe there's
think
a
there's some-
philosophical question about where, I understand because the parking's in the back, you'd sign in the back, and seeing on the plans that, at least the best I could tell, there was no signage in the front.
Very small one.
Very small.
There was a small space on the front
Okay.
facade on the building itself, on the home itself. There is an advantage of having some sort of sign over the entryway, and maybe it just says enter or welcome or something on the backside. And if we can somehow indicate that it's not a sign, just because that would avoid having pedestrians walking down the driveway. If they park back there, they know they can get right in that door, and I think that would be helpful. So I think there's a way that we can work through some of those issues too.
We just say entrance, or maybe.
Yeah, or welcome, or whatever,
So can they?
in a variety of languages or something,
Okay.
yes.
But a
Right.
sign cannot be on the building at all in the back that says this
That's
is.
facing the residential
Okay.
district, and that's the little part there.
Okay,
I have a
But if
couple
it's
of
not a
items.
sign,
okay.
One item, and I'm sure our home viewers are interested, and it wasn't brought up at all, but citing a line from item 5 here, it is likely that the deliveries to this business will primarily be small, requiring only a standard delivery service truck. Can you confirm that on that?
Yeah.
Just like a panel van,
Yeah.
small one?
Yeah, we would be getting typically product in very small quantities. It's not, in the store, in the house itself, we're not going to have a lot of inventory. The concept that we have is the house is going to be a house. So there will be products for the living room, and the living room will be staged like a living room. So you will not have like 20 different varieties of, whatever, like a tablecloth, for example, or a table runner. So the idea is that, yes, it would be small quantities coming at maybe more frequent times, yeah.
Question number 2 is, with the challenges that this site has, and we've discussed quite a few of it and gone through them, why this site?
To be honest with you, when we purchased the property, we really liked the structure of the house, the appeal of the house, the brick and the styling of the house. We never wanted, so for sure my wife was always looking for a retail space, but we wanted the retail space with a charm. We didn't want like a standard glass and steel retail space with like thousands of pieces of inventory inside. We wanted it to be special. We wanted it to be small. And we wanted it to have a charm. And this property being on the Main Street in Clawson, we thought would be ideal for that reason. And that's why we actually looked at other properties in Clawson and also Detroit for our retail space. But all of them were too, let me say, retail-y. They were just...
Not charming. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Him and his wife have actually been looking for about a year now. And then did you leave the country for a while and then come back? So they've been dealing with us for a long time, so they're pretty committed to this site.
Have you actually purchased this piece of property? You own this?
Yes.
And what is your timeline? What are you looking at moving in wise?
So we are ready to move. Once the site plan is approved, we've already, based on all the things we've discussed, we're having the engineer make the survey. We want to have it in some sort of ready state by the 4th of July. But really, that's what we're targeting. We want to be able to open it, if possible, on that day.
You've received a letter from our city engineering, right, that the pavement has to go 6 inches thick? On the frontage portion of it. I think they want the driveway 6 inches thick also, over 4 inches of aggregate. And for some reason, the water service on houses are usually 3/4 of an inch. And Jim might know, because it's becoming a business, it has to upgrade to a 1-inch water service?
We even build new houses with 1-inch water services. I believe the age of this home, there might be some lead water service in that area.
Yeah,
so.
I'll bet you there's lead pipe, yeah. So there's quite a bit of work there. Yeah. Admire your ambition.
Yeah, it's a dream, and you have one life.
Yes.
That's great. Okay, so we've addressed, I think, the sign in the back. As far as, I want to get back to the lighting in the adjacent property. So you have a property to the east, which is residential still, right? So as far as adequate screening for their light, or the light that may be downcast into their property, what do they have on their side? Do they have anything that would help screen that?
No, it's just a chain link fence on that side. That's why the light is pointing away from the residential area,
Okay.
and the way it is a cutoff luminary. I think one of the sheets still show what it looks like.
Okay.
So I think there wouldn't be any spill at all, actually. And then right behind the light is the shrubs that we're proposing as well.
Okay.
So I think they'll just see a lit up parking lot, but nothing reflecting onto their property.
Okay. And then in the back, as far as, do they have coverage from, or a screen on their own?
Right now, it's a chain link fence in the back too, and we're going to propose to make that evergreens. That way, it'll be screened throughout the year.
Okay.
And just keep the one existing deciduous tree there, but try to make it a continuous row of arborvitaes. And she's going to be planting additional shrubs here and there to accent the house, but it's more like flowers or small shrubs. So she does want to beautify beyond what I show on the plan. It's just not shown.
Okay.
She wants to have the freedom of deciding later. But she wants to create a garden area in the side of the house, and that's one reason why she wants to get rid of the wooden fence. She wants to make that a sitting area, outdoor event area. It's narrow, it's 11 feet wide, but she felt that she could put objects of stone or other interesting artifacts there as well, outdoor type of thing. And and I would like, I suggested to get rid of the fence because it's going to fall apart. It is falling apart right now. So with the neighbor already having arborvitaes there, I think we effectively screen most of the occupied areas of the rear, except for the drive itself, that has no room for any landscaping.
So as far as the wooden fence, you're again replacing that or just taking
No,
it
just
down?
taking it down because it is effectively screened from the photographs. You can see
Sure.
there's no gaps in it at all, and that is a commercial area as well. So I don't think it's a joining similar use.
The residential house to the east
Yep.
of them is also zoned commercial, so
Yep.
there is no screening requirement
Okay.
there. The property to the north, the residential property on the backside of the lot, does require a 6-foot masonry wall, but you guys have the option of accepting alternatives, which they're proposing either a wood or a chain link fence with a whole bunch of arborvitae screening.
Have the neighborhood houses been notified of this possible change coming on this building?
Because you've got two on the backside, right?
No, there is no zoning change, so there is not the
There's no-
300-foot notification
Okay.
requirement.
In the tree, the deciduous tree, a lot of times, trees along fence line are usually invasive. Do you know the species of that tree?
No, I couldn't really tell because there weren't any leaves that I could see that. It looked like nothing. It wasn't a maple or anything like that.
Okay.
It was something else, probably a junk
Okay,
tree.
no, that's fine. I have concern over, existing trees along fence lines, just because they do tend to pop up because people aren't attentive to their property.
We could remove it if that. One thing the engineers suggested, which we will do, is we're getting a topographical survey of the rear as well, and we're going to make sure that any drainage issues between abutting residential is going to be taken care of with our storm system. We're going to provide a catch basin system leading out to the street.
Okay, so I guess, my concern obviously is that, first, that as far as the tree, it provides some screen for that light. It's not year-round, but it's something. But at the same time, what is it? Do we want it, right? Is it considered to be an invasive species like an ailanthus, right? Because if it's a tree of heaven, then guess what? You're going to have, and probably have been affected the neighborhood, and who knows if any of the other trees are in that area the same type. So if it would be, I would consider taking it out if it is invasive, but having something replace it that could have potential canopy and screening effect of a year-round, whether or not that's a taller evergreen, right? Or again, deciduous, that's fine. So, apparently there's a caravan with its door open, in case anybody's interested.
That could be mine. Is it blue?
I don't know the color.
I think it was white. Did it say white on there?
No, it didn't say the color.
Grand Caravan.
Oh, that's mine then. I'm gonna go up there.
Uh-oh.
It's only inclement, it's not pouring cats and dogs, so. Okay. Trying to think of anything else that we, any other concerns? Anything else? Okay,
None for me. That's
all right. No other.
I want it to be made clear that they have to provide a full set of engineering drawings for the catch basin and the design of the parking lot.
So that is not part of this, that, we've not seen it yet. That was the proposal that just came up, is that?
That they always, I think that was part of the engineering review, that
Okay.
they have to submit that in the future.
Yep. Okay, so you'll have to have that part of that. Okay, so
Yeah.
timeframe to get this complete, you're looking at July? Okay, what is our usual requirement of the applicant as far as ensuring that he finishes and completes the project?
We made them aware from one of our first meetings that if they wanted to open up before the items on the site plan were completed, that they could ask this board for a temporary C of O, and they would be required to pay a bond for the remaining value of the work that has to be done.
So you're aware of that? Yes. Okay. 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 Any other further questions, discussions? All right. Do we have a motion?
So just, I'm happy to make the motion. I just want to make sure that we get the correct language in here. So, sorry, I'm looking at the memo here, and it just covers over the summary of outstanding issues to be resolved. So we've got, it doesn't sound like we need to do anything further with the basement regarding a motion, as far as I can tell. Or do we need to make a determination that it's?
I think you can make a determination that you're fine with the parking, that,
Okay.
that you agree that it's adequate.
Okay. Okay, folks, later on, if I miss anything. I will make a motion to approve the site plan for 288 West 14 Mile Road with the following conditions. Submission of a revised site plan meeting sign ordinance requirements, providing safety signage for the narrow portion of the driveways, and showing the required wall at the rear property line. In addition, let's see, sorry, I'm just going through the notes here. In addition, the determination of a final plan for the adequacy of the one-way circulation pattern adjacent to the building. Is there anything else we're missing from the team? Just want to make sure.
Final design of the ramp.
And final design of the ADA accessible ramp.
So I would also include, as far as the determination of the species of the tree, if found invasive, to replace it.
And final determination of the invasive, the species of the tree at the rear of the property if it's invasive in nature, and to address it accordingly.
That's, okay. All right, we have a motion. Anything
I'll
else?
support that.
All right, we have support. All right, roll call.
Mr. McHale?
Yes.
Mr. Shepherd?
Yes.
Mr. Watson?
Yes.
Ms. Hodges?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Kacera?
Yes.
Welcome to Clawson.
Thank you.
Best of luck.
Thank you.
All right. Next, we have a discussion regarding our large lot ordinance. Who would wish to start?
A little bit longer, so I'll just, as you're getting ready. Per the board's request, I altered everything back to the 10,000 square feet. To took out the section that refers to an appeal made in the Zoning Board of Appeals, left in the line where it says that large lots cannot be split. Altered the readability. One thing that you asked was the 35% lot coverage be put back in. Since this is a land division ordinance, the 35% is the lot coverage part of our zoning ordinance. So that's elsewhere in our ordinance. And I don't believe you were at the last meeting. I was
No,
trying
no.
to explain that the requirements of the R1 and R2 districts has the 35% in there. It's just not addressed in this ordinance because it would be repeating a different ordinance. And actually, when you do have the public hearing on it, I'll probably say you might want to consider restricting that, because if you have a 10,000 square foot property, you can have a 3,500 square foot ranch or a 7,000 square foot colonial. So, which is much larger than anything we have in Clawson. So,
There would be an embarrassment of riches. I would actually love to see that day, but in any event.
so the recreating of the large lot, since it went back to the 100-foot width and the 10,000 square feet, just reusing the existing McKenna maps from the original ordinance.
Okay.
Now I can hand it off to you.
So this is an interesting project for us because we have not been involved with you during your whole process of this. So John Weingarten in the office was kind enough to print us minutes of every meeting where this large lots were discussed. And I did go through them all, I want to tell you. And it was really interesting to hear the genesis of that back in 2010 and to see the ordinance amendment that was made and then to see sort of the impacts of those things. A lot of times when we're creating zoning ordinances and zoning ordinance amendments, we may not always anticipate what the consequences are until we're presented with a challenge to it that we maybe didn't foresee. What we wanted to do for you for this template or for this memo is to present a template of how we would approach with you just as far as understanding this current ordinance discussion, but in the future when we are going to be discussing ordinance amendments, this is the format that we would like to use so that we can keep ourselves all on the same page, so that we're all in agreement about what we're trying to accomplish and how we're going to do it. So that's how I set this up, trying to help us sort of get our arms around what you've been discussing as well. And I won't go through this because it is a little bit lengthy, but to really kind of understand like the introduction, what actions you've taken on this issue. When we do amendments with you in the future, we will have a thing at the top that will say previous discussions or planning commission discussions on this issue, and their most current meeting will have a little summary of that at the top. And then below that will be the previous meeting summary. And we want to do that so that if you are absent from a meeting, that you at least have some sense. You'll have minutes, obviously, but it's nice to have something in one document where we can kind of track what we're doing and why we're doing it to keep from going too far down the road on it. So we had the language in there that you had seen previously, and then some of the concerns with that, and then some of the examples that we are aware of other communities and how they regulate land divisions. And so we put in 3 examples of that. And what those seem to center on for us were creating land divisions that were consistent with the character of the area. And that was one of the things that came up time and time again as I was reading through all of your minutes from all your meetings, is that idea of the character of Clawson and the small town character was really important as we were thinking about these lots and the splitting of lots, the dividing of lots. And so I think that would be a helpful thing to maybe define a little bit. And I know there were meetings where you talked about that and the challenges associated with that. But I think trying to consider that, and then for thinking about, like we were just saying, you know, those large lots and the large homes that could be built there, that seems, though, to be quite different from the small town character that I think you're talking about or that you've been talking about in the past. And so maybe I challenge you a little bit to think that through a little bit further. Just for further consideration of other options for amending this language, to define surrounding area. We noticed that from some of the other communities we looked at, that a minimum radius of 500 feet around that property is pretty consistent with how other communities do that. Again, providing criteria that reflect the small town characteristics of whatever surrounding area is in terms of lot sizes, lot coverage, maybe there's natural features, maybe it's style of homes, something that is speaking to that area so that as we consider a land division and whether or not that's appropriate, we know what we're measuring it against. So we're measuring it against, in this 500-foot radius, for example, similar lot sizes, similar lot depths, similar lot coverages of structures on properties, those kinds of things. And then also further considering the impact of the large lot for condominium development or future of those really large lots that are divided. Is that the result that you would anticipate seeing very large homes in those areas that really seem different? And that may be what you're anticipating, and that's fine. And I think that would be, it might be more clear if we can say that somehow. I think that's all I really had to offer in terms of our kind of assessment of where you've been and where you're at now. But happy to answer questions or just continue the discussion about this.
So we, as you probably saw from the minutes, we discussed this for at least a year, if not longer than that. And I reached out to Bill Tite, who was a member at that
Right.
point in time, who was
And
really
he really seemed to
spearheading
be
it.
the champion of this.
Yes, he was.
Over those probably almost 2 years, really.
Yeah, and part of the discussion, from what I understand, is that there is concern over the origination of this was from the Lincoln Oaks
Right.
project, which was taking an odd-shaped lot, which had characteristics of its own in the neighborhood for where it was, and turning that into a condominium project. There was voices against that project, and I think for a consensus at that point in time that the Planning Commission and residents did not want to see that. As it turned out, the economy failed, and then the project died effectively. And in the meantime, that's when that ordinance came about. And I think at that point in time, it was trying to address some of the unique lots that were in this city as a result of the city developing over time, that there were remnants of older home or farmsteads that were split up and developed, and that as a result of that, I wouldn't necessarily, I don't want to keep saying organic, but you have the bungalow effect that was taking place after the war. You have some houses that were built prior to that during the 20s, such as mine, that were catalog homes and things like that, that there's evidence of what took place when the city was developing, and that those are vestiges from our past that I think we were trying to protect. And as far as the development on those properties, I think we were in agreement as far as the scope, as far as maintaining the lot dimensions, because I know that we did talk about the potential of having a large home on that and what that could possibly mean. And if I recall, part of it was that there was a benefit to an alternative to some of the smaller homes that we have in our community, that we see a number of people who come, they like the smaller homes, but outgrow them, and they regret the fact that they've had to move because they wanted a larger home and would have intended on staying, and there's not that opportunity, and so finds residents elsewhere. And so there was that thought, too, as far as what could this potentially have that effect of, if somebody wanted to develop on their property, if they do have a larger, rather than splitting it up and having, again, two smaller homes where people don't feel the desire to stick around, and I hate using that phrase, but the fact that the incentive to stay in a smaller home, raising children and so forth, gets to be a little cumbersome. So there was that aspect of it too. And I think that developed over time as far as trying to protect some of the larger lots over in the Hendrickson area. And as we discovered, there were other areas that were found that, boy, we didn't realize that there was a concentration of these homes or these lot sizes in the southwest corner, or pocketed, in other places. And the thought was that those are unique, and that I went back to Bill as far as what was your thought as far as what was the intent, and his intent was that we do not split those lot sizes. So that was the consensus that I thought we had reached. That was his interpretation of what we were trying to achieve. But that was, I thought, where we left it until this came back up again. And I think, Scott, you were on at that point in time.
Just came on when you guys were
Just finalizing it, right?
into it, yeah.
Yeah. So we had public discussions, and I know that I know Vidya gave a presentation as far as and I think that's the only video of it that's still available from our meetings. That was the thing I was looking for as far as, okay, what were the meetings are fine, but when you actually see reactions of people one way or the other, what was the consensus? So that was the thought.
Mm-hmm. Well, it seemed as though reading the ordinance, that I think for me, the hard part was seeing that large lot size as it's defined and thinking about what your minimum lot sizes are in the zoning districts, that seems to be the big conflict point. Mm-hmm. So for saying we allow, in this district, we envision all of these lots to be small, except for you with the large lots, you have to keep yours the way they are. That, and in conjunction with thinking about the small town character and preserving the character of the existing neighborhoods, your point about having those larger lots available for larger homes is a valid one. And it seems that it may be still in conflict with really what has been stated as the intent of this ordinance. And I think that's where the conflicts are coming from. And in knowing about the recent lot split request and how that was approved, that I think...
I would say, though, as far as the discussion, it really wasn't about, large lot, tiny house. It was about keeping the lots themselves right, intact, because part of the concern was that if you do have a smaller house, then somebody could buy up a number of properties and then overlay them with a condominium.
Right.
Right. So we were trying to prevent that, but also it was more about this is the lot size as it is. I think we were looking at more from a preservationist perspective, not necessarily the house itself.
And that makes sense. And yet, if you didn't have any kind of historic district or historic protections over the homes themselves, if they're gone and replaced with something that's large on a large lot, I don't know that furthers your intent about preserving the character of the community and thinking about how the city was developed as farmsteads over time. If we're removing the home itself.
No, especially if you put a snout house in, right?
Well, and on the smaller lots, that's a whole other issue. Yeah. And those are really separate issues.
So, and I guess part of the concern that I had is that there was a concentration. There has been some development over time, over the past 20 years of those lots being developed. I want to say that the corner of, Nama and over by the elementary school at Kenwood, there are 3 houses that I believe were split at one point in time, I think. Is that like 01, 02 timeframe or something like that? So.
Yeah, I remember the same thing. The ones that come to mind are right behind the high school on Washington. There was one lot with a small house on it, and I believe there's 4 houses there now.
Yeah. So, and that's just personal anecdote, right? Those are the houses that, people will comment about as far as, why did they have to be put there and squeezed in? And again, that falls into the intent of keeping the lot the way it was. Now, whether or not the lot division itself is one that would fit into what we're trying to achieve. I don't recall, right? I mean, as far as that detail, but
I guess the question would be, did the lots meet the minimum lot size for the district? And did the houses meet the requirements?
Yes, they do. Yeah, I believe the ones behind the high school, one lot had to have a variance because
Yeah,
I think it was
one
45.
undersized and had to get a variance for it.
Yeah. So,
But the large lot, correct me if I'm wrong, I've always been under the impression that what we were trying to achieve was that we didn't want that, let's grab multiple lots and build a condo here in any of the neighborhoods. But as far as the house and the size of the house that people build, do we really have any restrictions on the size of the house that someone can build, especially if they get a hold of a large lot, like on Henderson or what Lincoln, the two houses that are on Lincoln right now? Large houses, large lots. They seem to fit in it well. I mean, do we have a problem with that?
as far as me, I don't. In fact, that's what my point was, that people who live in a bungalow of 800 square feet who love this area now have 3 kids. They're likely to move out rather than finding that opportunity someplace else. Now, whether or not they can expand on their property, right, or buy something new that may be developed in an area. But as far as restrictions, it's 35%, right?
Right.
yeah, but that philosophy that you just explained is in conflict with the wording of the ordinance, preserving the character of the neighborhood.
But that's such a general term, preserving the character of the neighborhood. Some of these new houses are being built, and some of them are large. But they look great. They're great-looking houses. So you've got some really nice in there. You can tell when a house is new, and then you've got some houses that are older, and they have character. The street that I live on, and our house might have fallen into that category back in 1997 when our house was built. It was the first new house that was built on that street in like 42 years. Our house was bigger than the other houses. But what happened on that street is literally, with the exception of 2 houses that I can think of, every house in that period that we've been there has remodeled, has done something with their house. The street looks amazing now.
Yeah, your street over for me.
Much nicer than when we originally moved in there. And I think that's what happens so character of the neighborhood. Yeah, I don't think that anyone wants condominiums built in their street, any place where we've got large lots.
And I think that was really what the intent was. And the character was not to have overlay condominiums in the middle of a neighborhood, not necessarily the design or size of the house. So that was.
And I guess that's sort of where we were coming from. As I did all the research, at the end of the day, does the ordinance that you have in place really support what I think you were trying to accomplish? Was really what I saw was trying to preserve not having condominiums built.
Exactly.
And multiple dwellings on lots that are intended to be single-family
Yeah.
residential dwellings. And I think your zoning districts cover that, except for the really large collection of lots. But again, if your zoning district is for a certain size of lot, certain lot coverage, then, and you have, you did see that you had adopted in the interim some condominium standards too, so that was good. But I guess it's the question over, does this ordinance really achieve what you expected it to achieve? And as we stand here and think about what's the character, we're all having sort of, well, we know it when we see it, but that's not really
Right,
good
and that's
ordinance
not really
language.
No, we
It's
talked
really
about
hard to
that, too.
enforce
So
that
you
one.
saying, so correct me if I'm wrong, you're saying we should reword the ordinance to be more specific, to say this is what we're trying to avoid, so that we completely understand what we're looking towards, and then leave the vague terms out like the character of the neighborhood or something like that.
Or we're defining the character of the neighborhood. So as I said, and I said here, if we're thinking about the part where we consider splits, land divisions, that we say the character is, and where we say that it may be appropriate to split a lot if it meets the standards and the character of the area, which is that it meets the same lot size, it's got the same depth, it's got the lot coverage around those homes is similar, that you would allow that to happen there if that's what the property owner wanted, rather than building one large house.
But so just a case in point, as far as the, I'm trying to remember, what was the street that the house is on that was brought up? I can't remember.
One's near the school?
No, not that one, the most recent one. I can't remember what street that was on.
Michelle's lot on the south end. Is it Weebick or South
No,
Chocolate?
it's not Gargantua. I can't.
Well, if you're looking for a contrast, take Goodale, where you've got those sprawling ranches
Oh, yeah.
on the one side, and you've got the bungalows right across
Mm-hmm.
the street.
So I guess okay, yeah, here you go.
Yeah, she was over on the
So-
south side someplace.
That I failed to notice. Wow, okay, forest for the trees. All right, so,
It was South Manitou.
South
Or-
Manitou. You sure it was?
No, South Chocolate.
Yeah, Chocolate, that's right. So you're looking at 500 feet from where that lot is, then you have everything that's along a block in from Crux that potentially would still be part of that area. So, in what I was looking at is a potential domino effect, is that if one goes, then guess what? Then you've opened up the area as far as, well, now this one can go, and now you've started to effectively shrink that area. Which, again, that goes back to what I was trying to find out from Bill. What was the intent? The intent was to not split the lots. Now, I understand as far as, the rationale and the
Right. Well,
request,
and
but.
I guess I would say that that raises a question for me.
Yeah.
If the intent is to not split the lots, I ask, well, why?
Mm-hmm.
Why are we not splitting the lots? Not just to not split the lots, because that's I think where some of the
It goes back
confusion's
to,
been.
two things, right? We were trying to effectively prevent
The
condominiums, right? And at the same time, as I brought up, as far as potentially have an available resource for people who can remain in Clawson that don't have a smaller house. Now, whether or not that happens or not, again, let the market decide that, right? But if it's between, a large lot that's being developed for now that once had a 900 square foot home that could potentially have a 1,500 square foot home, that's up to the developer, right? But we see enough of this on your street, the house that's across from Kenwood, that in our area, they're eager, in my opinion, to start taking some new inventory and put it on the market.
Right.
And whether or not a larger lot, finds that more desirable, and that more people are saying, if I had that size lot in our community, is that something that, they would be interested in trying to retain, because again, as far as the longer people stay, I think that adds to the small town character. I hate using that word, but when you have more transient, you don't have the vibrancy and the lifeblood of the community when everybody's moving in and moving out. So that was part of the discussion, as far as I recall. So.
With condominiums, whether they're attached or detached, it's usually the developer wants to get a higher density in the area. So if we
wanted-
could use the
He
wording
wanted
of
9, didn't he, at one point in time? We worked him down.
9 to 7, I
Yeah.
believe. So could we say to maintain or preserve the neighborhood to a density of single-family detached homes, wording in that, along that, to preserve that neighborhood density levels instead
But I
of,
think that goes back to your earlier comment about referring back to the zoning ordinance in terms of those standards. Leaving land division, and zoning be zoning, but make sure that land is divided or not divided, consistent with what the standards are for the zoning districts.
well, with single-family residential homes, you need frontage on a major street, you need the sidewalk out front. With detached condos or attached condos, you can have a driveway leading to the same size lots, but you don't have to have the sidewalk, and you don't have to have the frontage on the main street
You
and
do
stuff.
have, our districts have a minimum lot width, which is frontage. And if they only allow single-family, and I apologize for not knowing the answer to that, but if they only allow single-family homes or detached single-family structures, that takes care of that.
Well, they want to maintain the large lot ordinance, and I was trying to help us with the wording, get away from the preserving the neighborhood and get it towards density levels.
Well, is the concern, though, that you still wanted to be able to allow for a split to be requested?
No, that's been taken completely out of the ordinance per the request of this board.
Okay. So I thought that was And that was something that
Well,
we
that's-
were concerned about.
I have a
mostly
concern
because-
about it because our minimum standards for a lot is 50-foot wide. And now we're saying a 100-foot wide lot cannot be split. So we have one part of the ordinance saying, this is the requirement for it, and another part of the ordinance saying, you still can't do it. So,
That's where we see a conflict as well.
Yeah,
And
because I
that
certainly would feel
coupled with
conflicted if
then
I
our
owned a
small
100-foot
town.
property, and I was told I can't build two properties here, even though I meet the requirements, that would be, as a
Yes.
property owner, that would be distressing to me.
Yes. And coupled with the intent of the ordinance preserving the small town character, that further goes to that frustration from a property owner who says, but everybody around me has has a 50-foot wide lot. So why, my lot seems larger
And I don't understand
than,
why that was ever a concern, like no one's gonna take this 100-foot lot and let's split it and let's build condos. What he'd want is he'd want the two other 100-foot lots around them so he could actually build condos. So why do I don't understand why that is there. It doesn't make sense to me either.
Trying to recall, as far as, I think we were looking at, boy, trying to recall.
it's a long,
It's been
it's a long road.
7
I'll
years since we
admit,
came
yeah,
up with this, and
absolutely.
it sat there
Yeah.
for a long time thinking that we had it resolved.
right.
But it really was, as far as these are isolated properties within the community that we wanted to.
Well, and I appreciate your
The concern
point.
was that if we had to come up with a standard that was broad enough, but not too unique that it isolated just this particular part of the city, right? Because we realized that, boy, there is some potential, and we found, it's like, wow, this is surprising that this is what's here. And that came up, is this what we wanted? And the intent was, yes, this is what we wanted. So I understand, as far as, again, as far as a property owner, I don't want to necessarily be against that. But at the same time, we see what happened with Vincetta, right? I mean, that has split that neighborhood, as far as somebody coming in and saying, okay, I'm going to take these 2 houses down, and now I'm putting in 5. And that just completely caught Royal Oak off guard and completely upset all those neighbors in that area. And so.
Right, and that's a great example of a neighborhood that was full of larger homes on larger lots. And in these areas could be smaller, almost everybody a smaller home on a smaller lot, and yet a couple of the larger lots. So it's a little bit different in that aspect. And so, to your point about giving people the choice of maintaining a large lot, having that idea out there, maybe that's something that the city wants to promote more even within the real estate community, to educate realtors about, hey, don't think about moving. We've got some options here in this city where you could build a little bit larger of a home, to try to raise the awareness of that and maybe raise the visibility of some of those lots for those reasons. But I think it's still important to give people that option if they're in a place where, as we talk about in the memo, the surrounding area is consistent with what the zoning ordinance allows.
But that's my concern. When you
Yeah.
start doing that, how does that affect as far as the viability of that area, right? So that you start splitting this house, and then guess what? Now this next house that's 200 feet away is potentially up for splitting, when it wasn't, because you had a buffer of other houses in that area that would have prevented that, right? And I guess I don't want to see that happen. All right, the fact that we have that area, then and I know there's one old farmstead house that's still out there that potentially is on a lot that could be split into 3 houses or 3 lot sizes. Now, as far as whether or not the owners ever want to do that, I have no idea. Right? But it would be, I don't want to say a shame, because that's not mine to view, but at the same time.
Yeah, no, you're right.
So.
But why is that a problem? Like.
What's that?
That scenario you just laid out, that scenario where there is a 100-foot lot here, he splits it, 2 houses are built now, this one that's right next door to it says, well, listen, we don't have this extra space we used to have, so now we're just gonna sell and let, and then someone else is gonna build 2 more houses there.
Well, I guess my point is that it's a farmhouse that was built in 1890, right? So does it fit the character of Bungalowville? I guess not, right? But at the same time, does it, harken back to the small town feel of the city? I would say absolutely, right?
But the city used to be only small farmhouses, and it's not anymore.
But
Things
that's why we
change,
wanted
things
to,
evolve.
that's why we wanted to have this in place in order to try and preserve some of those lots. All right, so again, I understand as far as a property, a concern as far as the owner, but at the same time, what does that do for the community? And, we're here to discuss that. Obviously, at that point in time, when we came up with the ordinance, I thought we were pretty clear as far as what we wanted to try to preserve, right? And again, as far as, I see, my brother's house, right? He built a corner lot on south of 14 over by Coolidge. All those homes in that area over by that elementary school in Royal Oak, it's amazing that these are bungalows on slabs that are now being turned into $500,000 homes. Do we want to see that? I don't think it'll ever be a situation in this community. But at the same time, those are families that are moving in there. They're staying for a while, right? We're seeing a turnover of residents in this community that have, stayed in their house forever, right? They've turned it over to their kids, right? And they're staying there forever. But as far as that, at some point in time, will diminish, and you'll just have people coming in. And again, it's in the intent of, what we want for this community.
Right.
Right? But does that add to that small town feel?
I'm new to this conversation. I think it's really great to get all the sense of the why we're at this moment in time. And I just want to say I really appreciate the memo, just because for me it was helpful to get a sense of some of these decisions as well. Just in terms of just listening to the conversation, I think there's a lot of really great points made. And I think there's just the thing that's sticking in my head is the ordinance was created at a particular moment in time to address what sounds like a very critical issue of that time. And maybe I think there's something, Jill, that you said around the lines of, better clarity around, like, in a land use policy or as in the zoning, like just to bifurcate some of these conversations with similar intent to figure out what it is we're not trying to have happen going forward, and being clear about what we're not trying to have in some way. I think the language of small town character is really hard to define, especially as, I'm on a street too where periodic houses are, there's remodels, there's larger homes coming in, but who is coming in are families. And I think there's an important notion that is sometimes lost in preservation, and I really think preservation is important, but that the times change and how to stay relevant as a town, and what are those other dimensions of small town character. It's in my head, when I think about the street that I'm on, it's long and it connects, from 15 Mile to Crooks. Some larger lots, some smaller lots, but really what's there is it's a diversity of high-quality single-family homes built in different periods of time. It's in my neighborhood, it's the diversity of homes, ages, but more often than not, it's the care and the quality that goes into them. And so, how to preserve, in my head, and I think about a small-town feel, I think about the who is there, less so about the what is there, and so the who is there is family. So what are the things that compel families? What are the things that enable families' flexibility to stay? We're in a very small house ourselves with 2 young kids. It's tough right now, and a dog. It's a very big dog.
Try two.
Yeah, and so as I think it's a really important question. But if it's to still solve for the condos, I think we just need to address the condo question in some particular way, shape, or form. Or if it's, and maybe I'm being naive about some of those particular elements. I think we've tried to, as I look at the ordinance, and I'm trying to unpack, like, what does this do? It covers 2 big, broad areas of work, and it's really hard to distill what the intent is. And I think, to me, that's a question of, like, disentangling it and focus on those core elements and what we're trying to accomplish.
At the other side of that, we do have public discussion that will be part of this, right?
Absolutely. This is the discussion before we present you with information or language that you would then set a public hearing for.
Got it.
And what we're trying to help is that we're able to apply the ordinance fairly and equitably to everybody. as well as to be able to defend the ordinance should we be challenged on it. So those are important things to keep in mind. Understanding where you're coming from is good, and knowing that we want to preserve some of these things, but, what are our boundaries? How far can we go in this before we start getting pushback? So we want to make sure that we are doing what we can do to achieve the goals, the stated goals of the city, without stepping over the line too far and having the blowback from that be unpleasant. So.
Well, really, what are the goals? I mean, I've seen a lot of development in the city of Clawson myself. From when we bought our first home right there on Park Drive when they were brand new. Okay, you had that particular housing project. Then you had the development in the second block of Park Drive. And then you continued from Elmsford. So you have several different divisions and types of homes in the development. Now you go up the hill by Shalom School. You have an entirely different breed of home up there. So to me, if I bought a lot 100 foot wide, and if I want to sell it or split it, what that does for the city, it brings in affordable homes to young families to get started. We have a good school system, so we can promote that. But I bought this home, I got this big lot, I'm ready to move out.
But that was the concern, right? That you would do that, people would not put roots down. They would have a starting home, right?
Right.
And that's going against as far as what I think this city was originally founded, right? That you had families that stuck around, right? And we're not
Yes, you
seeing that.
most certainly did, but you don't have that now.
No, and that was the point as far as if you had the option of having these inventories of larger lots, that perhaps that could also help attract and maintain those populations of people who wanted to stay here but felt that they couldn't. I mean, I have anecdote after anecdote of families that I know that had, and like, how do you like where you are? And so like, it's okay, but my commute's 45 minutes longer and I miss Clawson.
I think it's a really good point. I wonder, how much we can solve for, like, the changing nature of work. I mean, it'd be one thing if you could stay in your community and live there, but that's not reality anymore. I think for many individuals, and it's not to say that there should be lots split. It's just how to accommodate for reasonable development, I think, over a period of time. And the character of Clawson, what having young kids in the schools, is the small town feel that comes from the walkability. It comes from the connections you have to a very, I think, quaint, charming downtown, but also the high quality sidewalks, the parks. And so for me, my perspective, like, we get by on a small lot because we have such great access to parks and to be able to walk down there and spend time with our neighbors. And that's the community feel that I think, when I think about the character of Clawson, it's the public spaces. I don't know if others would think about that, because I think there's a quality of homes built in the 20s, the 40s that are really important to preserve and add to the, I think, the appeal. I was down a street, my wife and I were, we periodically look at other communities, and we were in Berkeley, and it's a whole street of one side is bungalows and the other side are these 2 to 3 story, very much, you can't call them McMansions, they're not, but very cookie cutter, large scale developments.
Bigfoots.
And I can't speak to the character because I don't walk around those neighborhoods, but it just doesn't feel the same way that Clawson feels.
Yeah.
And that you would handle through a different ordinance.
I'm
And
sorry,
you can
say
do
that again,
those.
Jill?
You can address some of that concern over architectural design through other ordinances, but that wouldn't be through land division. Or, just massing
Actually, that's a really
standards.
interesting point, because we spend, I think we spend very smartly a lot of conversations on biodiversity in terms of tree plantings across the community. And so how to embed some of that also in the residential types of ordinances.
Yeah.
Good point.
So I'll just say, as far as, that the walking away and trying to revisit the ordinance and reaching out to Bill was maintaining the lot split. I understand as far as where you're coming from, how do you achieve that and still try and incorporate character? I guess at this point in time, that was not brought up, and if it was, I don't recall how we resolved that. And again, it goes back to, we can't be as restrictive as a legacy tree in some communities, right? You can't impose that on.
Well, you could.
Oh, okay.
We can talk about that later.
Well, like a legacy property, is that what you're talking about? Or?
Well, there are historic districts. That's a whole other issue for another
Okay,
discussion
but
as
as
well.
far
But
as-
I don't know that that's something that
Yeah,
the city wishes to
you know.
pursue either.
Yeah.
But-
So, and I just want to go back to that. That was part of the walk away that,
Yeah.
this is what we have. We have a map that shows it, and the intent was, that's it. So that was the walk away. But, again, the property rights person in me says, why can't I do that? I understand that part of it. But at the same time, again, as I brought up, you have Vincetta. What does that do for the community, right? You can have somebody who says, okay, here's my profit, walk away, and the developer who doesn't care about the community walks away with his profit. Now you're left with, an echo of far as what the community once was. So, anyway. Okay.
But trying to get that small-town feeling, which I think is part of this discussion, it's changed since I've been here because people before, like you said, they stayed here.
Yep.
And the kids stayed here. And they developed and they nurtured around the city, developed in there, very active and everything like that. Nowadays, like you mentioned about the 45-minute drives, we are centrally located to Auburn Hills, to the GM Tech Center, and a lot of other areas. So this is a good location from that standpoint. But it's a different world now, too, because you have everybody doing this, and you don't get out and use the facilities like it was when we first moved here. You couldn't get into the park because we had so many teams going. Now you're combining cities just to build teams. So, from that aspect, it's different. So, small town community, yes, we do have some nurturing on that, but it is different and it's not the same as what it was.
Yeah. No, I've been asked, what do you mean you can't raise a family of 5 in an 800 square foot house? We did it. That's the kind of, like it's.
We had 9.
It's right. It's different time.
And that
People
was a
have more
1,200 square foot house.
So,
I
okay.
have 7
Yeah.
and 1,000 foot.
Oh, God. But that's the thing, right? As far as if you had the option of moving to, would you want to move out of here?
I'm a little, well, no. But again, we're one of those people who never left.
Yeah.
I mean, my mom never, we've been here forever.
Yeah.
Look at me, I'm here.
Yeah, I graduated with his son.
Yeah, we've got neighbors on our street. It's 2 generations now in the same house.
Yeah, my in-laws are 3 blocks away.
Yeah.
My aunt's 3 blocks away. So no, I like this town. I do think it's still a small town feeling, and I do think a lot of people stay. If you actually go through the school system, you wouldn't believe how many Clawson graduates have come back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot. So I think we do keep a lot of people here, and I do think some people outgrow, but they're always still looking in Clawson. It's not that they choose to leave. Like you said, your friend or whatever, they want to stay here, but sometimes, they don't find the right house, or they can't find one they can actually purchase because there's people, they go into bidding wars. I have so many friends who tried to purchase, but they kept losing off the bidding. So, I think Clawson's hot. It's hard to get houses in here sometimes, the one that you want. Because, again, we are very diverse in our houses.
But is that lot, or is it house size, do you think, or?
Well, personally, when I bought my house, it was the lot size.
Okay.
I didn't care about the house as much as more of what size the lot was. Because I was an outside person. You can go outside a lot.
Yeah.
But I do think people do look for lots. But if you're from Clawson, you don't, the lot's not as, it is important because you don't want to hear the toilet flush from your neighbor. But.
Or have them steal your Wi-Fi?
But I don't know. I think a lot of people come here, and it is very different all around. You can go from the north side to the south side. Yeah. The houses are different. And except for Park Drive and Leroy, it must have been the same builder because they're exactly the same.
No.
They weren't?
It was different.
Was
First
it?
block in Park Drive and the first block in Knollwood on the north side were the same. South side of Knollwood, the north side of Elmwood or Elmsford, that was a different builder. And a different builder in the second block on Park Drive.
Oh, they're all the same. They're the same layout.
They look, they're different inside,
A little bit.
but not the same builder.
So what has Royal Oak done since the Vincetta development has happened? Have they
Well,
addressed that?
They did that overlay district that they had, the residential overlay, but that really was addressing specifically large lots that were neighborhoods of large lots. They defined that as that was part of their character and that was part of their zoning ordinance. So this is a little bit different than that.
I mean, I consider as part of our neighborhood,
Mm-hmm.
Lexington and Mount Vernon, right? Because it's within walking distance. And those are, larger than I think anything we have in our community, with the exception to maybe those that are on in that area. But they're actually wider too.
But your
So-
zoning ordinance has the standards that it has.
Yeah.
So we just want to make sure that you're being consistent with those things. And I think that last lot split that came up was really what triggered let's go back and look at this and make sure that we're doing the right things in the right order.
In that light, for that house, that lot, how many other lots fall into that category? Because maybe this is moot at this point. Have we looked at an inventory of 100-foot wide lots that would be exceptions to the neighborhood? Could we identify those so that we know specifically what we're talking about?
Well, the argument I used was to maintain the character of the neighborhood, and I proved that there was over 150 lots within the 2-block radius of residential homes
Yeah, but you
that
also
were
have the ones
exactly
over
half the
on,
size.
what is that, what's the last street? right?
Batchawana.
Batchawana. So,
That's where we have the old farmhouses.
but you
still.
also have the 3 houses that are on, the gentleman that came up to us a year and a half ago, the corner lot that was nearby Kenwood. I think they're on there, I think. So you have Kenwood that's highlighted, and then you have 3 properties right next to each other on the southwest. You're down.
There's Kenwood
there's
School.
right there. Those right there.
This one right here.
Yeah, and then you've got the 2 similar sized lots for that.
Yeah, there's one single-family ranch on this 3-lot thing.
Well, no, I mean, they're actually, I thought it was 3 homes that make that up, right? There's one house, there's a second house that's in a similar sized lot next to it, and then the last on the south is similar.
And those were the ones that were developed in 2001.
No, that's not that. That's where is that? Farther to the south. On, oh God, I've lived here for so long, I don't even remember my street names. God.
I can see the houses,
Yeah.
I can't tell you what street they're on.
It's one block up from the street that is just west of Kenwood. There's Kenwood Elementary, there's a
Yeah.
street after that, and then you go one more street up over there, and I don't know.
It's the furthest southern street. That's before you get to Custer.
Yeah, I don't know what the name of it is either.
So, anyway. Right, because we are.
What I'm thinking is the wording that we have right now isn't sufficient enough to go for a public hearing on it. You've given us some direction on how to change the wording. I don't know if we need to request, is it council that puts together a moratorium on lot splits until we resolve this? And would that wording be done by our city attorney? Okay. So,
And the only reason I brought those to 3 houses, because we had the gentleman come in that has the corner property, and we told him, according to the way that we had understood the ordinance, that he could not do that. Now,
Correct.
again, as far as character of the neighborhood, you've got 3 houses right in a row, they're exactly the same, with the exact same size lot. Now, as far as, what's the now intention as far as, wording. I mean, it's horses out of the barn at this point for telling that gentleman, no, you can't. And now that we have a house that's, which I would say on Chocolate was isolated, I would agree with that. But those are, right next to each other. So, and that goes back to my point as far as, okay, if you cut this one down, then these two are now no longer viable as far as staying the size lot that we had first intended when we created the ordinance.
So maybe defining the surrounding area in a smaller way, so within the same block, or?
I would agree with that.
We have that part of the ordinance is front yard setback is within the same
To be
block.
something consistent with that. Which makes sense, because that's something that people are already familiar with.
So, and I would also say adjacent lots, if they're similar size, is that something that could be defined?
See, I can, I agree with the concept of this entire, these are all the same size lots, but the concept that I had a problem with these
That's
20,
the thing, as far as-
20 to 25 lots that are in the middle of a subdivision that have lots half the size.
And if they're isolated and there's nothing next to that, I can see the reason why, right? But again, my point was that, what does that do if we do away with that, right? Is there a domino effect as far as affecting what the ordinance was trying to achieve in the first place?
And it may be, but it may be that it takes a while to get there. If you're averaging, it would.
But I also liked your concept as far as, communicating with the real estate
Yeah.
developers that, hey, you could turn a profit and not sell this house for $500,000 if you were just building it 2 streets down in Royal Oak, right? I mean, there's that aspect of it. So,
And I think, one of the things to consider too is if we go back to those areas that are largely yellow, where you've said these are large lots, they can only be 10,000 square feet. Envision those being developed with really large homes. And think about the neighbors that live near there in terms of their expectations of whatever the use is now, and then they're going to be built with these big homes. Is that consistent with what people expect? And if it is, then maybe there's specific language that should be included maybe in the next master plan update. I didn't see anything in the current master plan for the city that really addressed that concept about single-family neighborhoods and providing a range of lot sizes to encourage a variety of home sizes and home diversity. That may be something that, and we don't need to necessarily wait 5 years until we do the next plan, but maybe there's an amendment to be thought of later that we'll start to think about some of those issues, specifically housing
would it
related.
incorporate snout houses?
Well, the issue with the snout house is on the narrower lots.
Yeah.
If somebody wants an attached garage,
I like
Got to
them.
go in front.
it's got to go in. I mean, there's no, unless you have them go all the way around, but then,
Yeah.
I mean, that's really difficult.
Yeah.
A lot of the homes that are designed for barrier-free design have the garage out
Sure.
front and then a ramp up to the front door and stuff, so.
But I think we can
But
also
they could-
address, it doesn't
Absolutely.
necessarily need to be a, 2-car garage
Right.
for those, right? So I think
There's
we
one
had-
on Highland, isn't there?
Elmwood was our
That was the first one that came up.
first true snout
Elmwood.
house.
I
Yeah.
haven't heard about that.
The 10% door
And it
on the
is,
front.
Oh, no, it's a snout right in your face. Yeah.
Okay.
But that's somebody's choice of design too. I mean, I've mentioned that before, but they like it,
It was sad, it was meeting a need,
their need.
their need.
But I
for
think,
that-
in this,
that
and going back
resident.
to this conversation,
Yeah.
I think if you take some time to look at some of the opportunities we have to, foster walkability or connectivity, I think what the Snout House takes away is the front
Absolutely,
porch.
absolutely.
I mean, that's
I
the
completely
first
agree with
thing.
you.
It's a
Yeah.
it's a total dead zone.
Right, right. So there may be some certain massing standards or architectural guidelines that we can apply to the front facade
Mm-hmm.
of homes to try to mitigate some of that, for sure.
Okay.
But that's a separate, we
Yeah.
don't want to confuse the two, like you
Sure.
were saying.
Yeah, because you got sometimes 2 people working, so they might just be a couple that has the house and They just come and go, and that's it. They don't need a porch.
They might not need a porch, but again, the small town character, what are we trying to
understand.
accomplish with?
Right.
They
And
might
maybe if
not
they
need
had a
it.
porch, they would find that they didn't need to just go to work and come home, and go to work and come home, that maybe they would meet their neighbors and go walk to the
Well,
park.
if their house was bigger than the 1,200 that we grew up in, you know, you need at least 1,500 now.
Yeah.
So,
So as far as we will want to narrow down from 500 feet.
I think we'll work and we'll talk through what the implications of that. Maybe we can update a map that would highlight some of those areas in a better way.
Okay.
Yeah, we
Okay.
can.
And again, as far as if they're adjacent, I think we want to try and maintain those properties, right? If it's sitting isolated, I can understand. Right, so.
okay, just one more item to add on to that. As far as if these were stagnant properties, if you split them and you put 2 homes up, that's additional income to the city.
Or a larger development,
Or what?
or a larger development, either way, right?
Unless you put
Proposal A is
limitations.
out the window as soon as you put, you know, a she shed in the back of your house, right?
Wait, I missed that point completely. Say that again. I missed that completely.
So he's saying as far as if you have 2 houses, now there's
It's
additional
more
income.
income
But if
for
you
the-
tear down a 800 square foot bungalow and you put up a 1,500 square foot house, you're adding additional revenue to the city. Now, what does it do? I have no idea, right? Does a larger house bring up overall value for the neighborhood, or does 2 similar size houses, everything else maintain the same, right? It's still additional income, right? And if people want to start developing their house, then they break into the property tax cap, if I understand that correctly, as far as proposal A, right? So that it spawn more development because people like their house will like to add on, right? So that, you know, they don't like their 800 square foot house, but they do want to get another, you know, sunroom, but, you know, there's additional revenue for the city, right?
Well,
So-
you know, the cases in point would be, look at all the homes that were redeveloped in Birmingham. I mean, they just totally added on to all square footage that they had in their yard, pretty much.
And there are standards in Birmingham.
Yeah.
I was the city planner back when we were talking about the Bigfoot homes there many years ago. And some of the streets have changed dramatically.
Yes.
From small little ranch houses to bigger 2-story homes, and
With
it's
no yards,
remarkable.
no green space, and no canopy.
Well, but they have lot coverage requirements,
Yeah.
and I am told that every house virtually meets it. And you would be surprised, because some of them you're like, there's no way.
Yeah.
But they do.
Yeah.
So people can get creative with the way they use their space.
All right. Anything else? So you'll recreate, or not recreate, but
We're going to,
tweak?
yeah, we'll look at this and we'll add in the surrounding area to this discussion as some of the considerations for the land division.
Also take the ordinance that I provided and start cleaning up that language.
So we'll see a
It
new map
addresses-
too with,
We'll make a new map.
okay.
Yes.
All right.
We need your zoning.
So I think some of the confusion for some folks is that they see that large yellow area on the north side, which is actually the park.
Right.
Right, and then also some of the school areas, right? So,
Right. So,
yeah.
We need to build
and that's
houses in
really
there.
like,
If they could get 50, 60
that's
houses
almost
in
a
there,
separate issue or an issue that could be handled in a different
Condos.
way. Like
Real
if
high-rise right
that
in the
is
park.
intent, well, I know that's the
Right
park,
next to
but,
the football field.
and that should be zoned as such or zoned as single-family residential, so that if it ever weren't a park, it would fall to be single-family residential. So that takes care of that issue. But if there are big areas like that you want to see developed in a certain way, handling that with zoning standards is much more clear-cut than trying to create the land division ordinance to fit this preservation of the larger lots. That seems much different than those other standalone areas, if that makes sense.
Sure, yeah.
So,
I
like,
don't know if
strike a
anybody
vision
wants-
for that and
I'm
say,
sure
this
there's
is what we wanna
developers
see
out there
here.
who would love to have their chance at developing our city park, right?
Well,
But,
yeah, no, and
but I don't know if residents would want that.
Okay, Jill?
That seems like
Oh,
something we should just turn back to green, like that doesn't seem like it should be on the map. Should it?
With this ordinance, it adds another layer of protection that it would never be developed as a subdivision. Because it was originally designed for those streets to go through the city park and hundreds of homes to be there. So with this large lot ordinance and it being on the map, it says it can only be one single-family home. So it's another layer of protection. Government redundancy.
Giant house.
Maybe Bezos wants to move here.
For you, Jill, thinking
Yes.
out of the box,
Keep those kids
Okay.
out of my yard.
can you have different limitations or ordinances for, say, north of 14 Mile?
Sure,
Okay. And compared to south?
absolutely. Yeah, there's no,
Depending on
you
how
have
the lots break down?
two zoning districts for single-family residential. There's no limit. I mean, it's nice not to have like 18, but you could certainly add in another one or two
Okay.
with a specific intent written into the ordinance.
Right, and this
In
would
this
kind of go
district,
along
we
with what
intend.
you're thinking on that too, Glenn.
Well, again, I want to balance property rights with, what the nebulous character of the small town is,
Feasibility,
right?
yeah.
Walkability, right? There's something there that we can achieve. Yes, it's transcendental. Yes, I know it would be hard to put it on paper, right? But the closest we can do to achieve that and have input from the community as far as what they want to try to achieve that, I think we need to try and do that.
And we can get scooters too.
Okay. All right. Okay, so
All right.
what's your thinking as far as time frame?
Let's see.
Open-ended at this point?
Well,
You can
the
come
March,
back
maybe the
and-
March 12th meeting? That'll give us a couple weeks to get the maps together and.
Yeah, but the longer we're dealing with it and not setting the public hearing, I'm worried about an
But we need a
application
moratorium
coming
though,
in.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Put a freeze on it.
And so,
So what does that require from us as far as requesting a moratorium?
Well, if we establish a timeline where we said we would bring you an ordinance updated in March, and March 12th, the hearing would be the following meeting in April, because we couldn't do it 2 weeks later because of noticing requirements.
Okay.
Then it would go to council after that. So 2 months, 8 to 10 weeks.
but does this board want to request the council put a moratorium until we work out the new
That's the
ordinance?
question.
Because we're getting, by the time we get this thing ironed out, you'll start getting contracts
Because if
pulled.
we try to get it on your next agenda, that means we really have to have it done by next Tuesday.
And then after you get it through the public hearing, then it got to go to council. We're talking May.
Yeah. And at that point, you'll have a lot of people knocking on your door saying, I want that property, this property, that property, potentially.
Potentially, yeah.
Okay.
So we can make a motion to put a moratorium on large lot applications, or, and where would?
You can make a recommendation for
recommendation.
council to consider putting a moratorium on splitting of large lots until we have completed the process of addressing the ordinance.
Perfect. So we need to take a vote on that.
A second on that motion, or someone
Okay.
make that motion?
Okay, I'll propose what Jim said then.
All right. Second?
If we can do that, support, yeah, that's easy.
Got that, Cheryl? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
As my kids are probably, let's put that to bed for now.
I'm going to do a vote.
We got to.
Oh, I'm sorry, vote, yes, thank you.
Roll call.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Shepherd,
Yes.
Mr. Watson,
No.
Ms. Hodges,
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. Casera,
Yes.
Mr. McHale.
Yes.
All right, okay. Now it's to bed. All right. Public discussions. Anyone from the public wish to discuss anything that's not in the agenda? Under the public, other business, okay, so seeing none, we'll move on to other business. Why don't we address city concerns, if you would like to, Mr. Elvis?
808 West 14 Mile. It was I can't remember the name of it, but it was a self-help book. And
Baker's Market.
yeah, Maker's Market is moving in there. Similar space requirements and use in there. They were selling books, and this is a maker space for similar to the local vendors, merchants, and not. I don't think they're going to be making too much stuff there, but they will be marketing the Made in Michigan stuff like that, in that location, and then training on how to cut the wood, the laser stuff like that. They'll be training the local makers on how to do that there. I'm stumbling over my words here. Sorry. I did talk to them. It's the same owners of, it used to be Pop Art Studio up on North Rochester Road. They used to throw parties, kids parties and adults parties, doing Andy Warhol paintings and stuff like that. So they're familiar with Clawson, they're familiar with our ordinances. We haven't had a problem with their business. They changed their business model to this. And they don't have to come in front of this board, and they can open up. I just wanted this board to be aware that something's going in there.
Can I just add to that? Because
yeah,
I
go
thought
ahead.
they were totally different. Actually, I was under the assumption that this is what they were doing. They were actually, they don't rent the space, but if you make homemade stuff or you make your stuff, you can actually take it to this place and sell it. Right. But I don't know how the people who own the building, how they make the money, because they don't do it on consignment, and they don't charge table fees, but they have them come to their building and they sell their products there.
Yeah, I read an article saying the exact same thing.
Yeah, I didn't know they were doing that other
Rust Belt,
stuff.
like in Ferndale, I kind of thought of it as that kind of a Rust Belt type of thing.
Yeah.
That's what it seemed like to me, but I don't know.
Just wanted to add that.
Thank you, because I'm sorry, I was stumbling over my words there. Also, the West Maple Road submitted plans for me to review the landscaping that was set up for 1177 West Maple. That office out the front of the Fulman Moore.
And Maida.
And I just have to review it in conjunction with the Planning Commission's recommendations on what types of landscaping goes where. So that's one of the drawings where they dropped it off and asked me to do a review for free. So I'll be getting to that as soon as possible.
Right on that. All right.
And I'm very disappointed in Wendy's not showing up tonight. This is the second meeting in a row. We tried contacting them. They addressed some of our needs, but yeah, I'm disappointed.
They have other Wendy's. They're not the only, this isn't the only one that they own, right?
Yeah. Well, we had similar problems with Kentucky Fried Chicken because the corporate ordered the facade changes on them. So if they don't get it done in a certain time period, if they start their paperwork late, then corporate shuts down the funding until the next year. So that's what I'm anticipating we're running into is they're not going to be on until next year's construction phase.
We had something similar happen to a Dunkin' Donuts operation at one point in time, if I recall.
Correct. Yeah. I'm sure there's other stuff, but
Actually, I have one thing. I mean, it's city related, I suppose. No, it is. So I was just really confused by it, and I would just love some guidance, maybe, or insight from staff. So there was the message that Jim, you forwarded from the city attorney some time ago with, just looks like some crib notes from a zoning board case updates. And I was just curious, one, should we be expecting these more regularly? Is it temporary, just due to we have an interim city manager as opposed to a city manager? I understand it's for an FYI. And I guess three, what's the utility of sending the messages out? It's just confusing, like how it fits into a process or a conversation. And I just want to make sure that I'm understanding how we should think about anything that comes from the city attorney.
Can I answer some of that? Because I think I know, unless you.
Go ahead, because I don't know if I can answer.
Sure, no, that's helpful. I'm just curious. It comes in the inbox, so what am I to do with it as a planning board member, if anything?
I think the reason that was sent to us is we had a meeting about a month ago where there was people from all the boards and the mayor and the city councils there, and part of what the temporary city manager said is because we were stating some facts that we felt like we were left out of the loop of certain decisions that were being made, and he said, hey, I'll start forwarding the information. You can start seeing this type of thing. So I'm assuming that's what that's from. He wants to make sure that we kind of understand, like, none of us knew why. Why did that sign get approved at Pep Boys? Why did they get to keep that sign up there? We said we were completely left out of the loop about it. So he said, hey, listen, I'll make it my responsibility to make sure that you guys are informed when things are happening. So I could be wrong, and that's the reason we got it, but I think that may be it.
And I guess the question as a body, should we be doing anything with that as it comes, and how do we treat FYIs if it's an FYI?
As part of that, and I don't know that answer, right? I mean, it was just as much a surprise. Like, okay, I can't interpret this as far as, okay, does this mean that it was okay? Because in my opinion, it wasn't. Because we were, offhandedly commented that, oh, they got their sign, and there was no detail about it during that meeting as far as what happened. And, no knock against Susie bringing it up, because I think her hands were tied at the same time, but it was city business. Oh, by the way, such and such. Like, okay, well, what does that do for us, right? Because now it's done. It's not in front of us anymore. And so part of this is that I think we have an update from zoning member. Reese, would you like to come up and speak more about this? If you'd like. Yeah, why not? Yeah, come and do this. Talk about the sign history, and then you can also talk about the FOIA update, if you don't mind.
Reese Scripture, 148 Park Drive, also on the Zoning Board of Appeals. So thank you for all reminding me, or making me wonder, why did I love doing this? Oh my God, I'm exhausted and I'm starved. Okay, so I shared with Glenn, and the reason I shared with Glenn is because it was not appropriate to share with the city attorney. It was not appropriate to put staff in the middle, and you guys weren't here. So you had nothing to do with it. So I shared with Glenn some stuff that came out of the FOIA, some stuff that came out of our meeting. He shared it with you, right? So do you all have that? Did you all get a chance to look at it?
What was this? I'm sorry.
Yeah, on Sunday evening, I sent out the message that Reese had sent out for her update regarding the FOIA, and it also had some of the ZBA notes as far as the.
I don't know if I saw that.
No, okay.
Not to say that it didn't come through, I just don't know if I saw that.
So, yeah, and I deliberately sent it to Glenn only so there didn't become an Open Meetings Act violation blow up of people going back and forth. And so it seemed like the only thing that made sense under the circumstances. So it really is kind of, and this goes into a lot of research, it really is kind of going back to what happened, and there's a timeline in there. And so to give some context, January is when the Zoning Board of Appeals denied a appeal by Pep Boys to put that sign up, okay? That was it. That's all we'd heard about it forever, and I don't have the timeline in front of me, until I believe the next time the ZBA met and approved those minutes was sometime around June, which would have been the point at which Pep Boys could have done something, although they probably could have came in earlier if they were going to change their appeal. Oh, thanks. But in any event, they chose to go right to a lawsuit instead of coming back. So what happened is they went under the wrong ordinance. They were told that. They were told that in our meeting. They went under the wrong ordinance, and they went ahead with it anyways. We declined it because we had no choice based on the ordinance they submitted it to us with. And instead of coming back to the Zoning Board of Appeals and going under the right ordinance to give us the opportunity to approve it, they decided to sue. So now you have this lawsuit, and nobody hears about it until a meeting. All of a sudden, bam, the sign goes up. I think I was not here for that meeting, so I didn't even know that as a Zoning Board of Appeals person to say, wait, time out, what happened? And I hadn't noticed the sign up down there. So I believe you or Susie reported Pep Boys has a permit for the sign. Done. Okay, so that's the first anybody had heard of anything. And then I didn't even realize it because I wasn't here for another month or so. And then I get wind of it and realize what's going on. And I'm like, wait a minute, how did that happen? How is it possible at all that that something like that would happen? And ZBA was never told, and planning was never told, because if they went to court and got that, there's something either wrong with our ordinances or that needs to be fixed, and that would be planning, sign ordinances, or it set a precedence that says, hey, everybody, if you file under the wrong, an appeal under the wrong ordinance and you lose, just take it to court and the city will settle. I mean, that's really what it did. And in fact, if you watch the Zoning Board of Appeal meeting where we sat there and asked Kingsep that, he's like, well, yeah, it was kind of, yeah, that could happen. Yeah, this was a one. So, and then he said, and Deb said, we brought this up at the joint planning that some of us were at, Annie was at, Scott and I were at, and you were at. We brought this up there. And the mayor sat there up front when we asked this set of questions, how did this happen? How did we not know? This is important for planning and ZBA to know. And her answer was, well, staff had nothing to do with it. No one had anything to do with it. No one knew to come report. Okay. And then Kingsep stands in front of us in the ZBA and we ask the same question. How did it take so long? Why didn't this come to us? I had nothing to do with anything. I knew nothing about anything. Well, under the FOIA request, and you all know I have a lawsuit going, so under the FOIA requests that were filed, one of the things asked for was Kingsep's billing. And you see the entire long list of, and I've got it, I say what's on here, you know, the timeline, yellow is what happened, and normal is what was on his billing, and then some italics was just some comments. There is mention after mention after mention of Kingsep, the mayor, staff, all knowing what's going on. Those were lies. They flat out, bald out face, lied. Kingsep stood here and lied. The mayor lied at a meeting to all of us, because that wasn't true. Instead of saying, we made a mistake, instead of saying, wow, you're right, it's a good thing we're going to have more of these joint workshops so we can converse more often, or hey, we should have sent someone to talk to you, or hey, you know, and John was not supposed to be involved. In fact, he shouldn't have been involved, but he was. So they knew this, and they lied to us. And I have a real issue with that. I'm still on the Zoning Board of Appeals. That is something that we should all know together, should have been informed way in advance. None of this should have happened, and then we certainly shouldn't have been lied to. So that was information that I shared, and what questions do you have?
Well, I guess as far as, George, your question about why you received the notice from city attorney, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know whether this helps put it in perspective. I don't know. Again, it just out of the blue, here it is, but this seems to be related to what was going on at the time.
I mean, I wouldn't, for me personally, I just want to be clear not to go that far with it, because I think there's a lot of reading in to be done. I think just from a very simple, practical perspective, the city attorney is emailing the planning board. There's just the functional question of, or maybe where the mayor, what do we do with it as a body, if anything at all? And it doesn't seem like that would constitute any, that in and of itself would constitute any particular issue, but I just don't know those things and how we may need to address it. And, you know, I just want to compartmentalize my question in that, and recognizing that this is a much bigger, more complicated story, right? So, and in and of itself, the question that I'm asking is very minor, I think, in context.
Okay.
The reason you got it is because we complained and said stuff, and finally he sent something out. I read it. It's helpful, not at all. Doesn't tell us anything about what we're supposed to do moving forward. It doesn't. Wendy's is the one coming in front of everybody that as a site plan, Wendy's could very easily come to the, see that? They're exactly what Pep Boys. That is,
And that
the-
was one of
that
the
is
questions
it.
that we had at that point in time, right? So
Yeah.
that while this is still being debated, what's going on with this.
And we asked that in ZBA, and that's when he's like, oh, yeah, you're right, that could happen, and I don't know anything.
Okay.
So. No more questions?
I don't have any other questions. Anybody? Okay. All right.
Thank you. I'm digesting.
Digest away. You don't want to say anything?
10-foot pole, is that what So, welcome to Clawson. Any other business that we need to discuss? No, I'll say no. Not tonight. Okay. Anything else?
I'll make a motion to adjourn if you don't care for one.
I'll support that.
All right, roll call.
Yes.
Ms. Hodges?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Kucera?
Yes.
Mr. McHale?
Yes.
Mr. Shepherd?
Set the record here.